Thank you so much for joining the conversation today, Dan. And you have a very outstanding career. And there's a lot of things that we can always learn from a conversation with you today. So thank you so much for joining and sharing your story with me and the audience of the show. Okay.
Pleasure to be here, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Then, can you do me a huge favor? Can you introduce who you are and the work that you do with our audience to start the program, please?
Sure. First of all, pleasure to be here. Dan Pontefract. My last name is Latin, and it means broken bridge.
Broken
So if
bridge.
you take Ponte from Pontefract, that means bridge, and fract, F-R-A-C-T, in Latin means to break or broken.
Ah.
And so you put the two kind of parts to my last name together, and I'm a broken bridge, which is really a funny way to say I'm trying to be the opposite of my last name. I'm trying to build bridges in my life and in my work, and I think there's an intersection there basically about me as a person, and that is, as much as my last name might mean broken bridge, my intersection is, well, yes, there are broken bridges. And so how might we fix those? Or how might I help others, cross a bridge that might be, in disrepair or, broken of some sort? Everyone has a bridge to cross.
Yes.
So I guess philosophically, I've always looked at myself saying, hey, I can help, I think. So why not help?
Wow, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that your last name is means broken bridge, and it's totally different than the works that you're doing. So let's examine that all together today. All right. Uh, then allow me to bring you all the way back to when you were a little boy. All right. So
Wow.
when we were young, right, we always have dream. We always people always ask us, what we want to be one day. And when we grow up, what do we think that we would do and things like that. So back then, what did you dream up one day you're gonna become?
Well, for a really long time there, I think between sort of the ages of 10 and 14, I thought I was going to be the lead singer of Queen or the Beatles or band. I mean, I was writing music and writing songs,
Ah.
and in our house we grew up with a lot of Elton John, a lot of Queen, a lot of John Lennon, a lot of Beatles, a lot of ELO, and so it was on all the time. Thanks to my dad, who's my parents are British, so there's a lot of British music that I grew up with, and so yeah, I think I wanted to be a rock star, to be honest. And then somehow I became pretty good at soccer, football, and as I was becoming better at football, I sort of got noticed, and I started ending up playing in training camps for the national team, the provincial team, and what have you. But I blew out my knee during one of the camps,
Sorry.
and so I had a really tough surgery, and I had a year of rehabilitation when I was 17.
Wow.
I didn't go to school for about 2 or 3 months,
Oh.
and so I used that, I suppose, as a way to think, oh, how am I going to help people? Because I kept going to doctors, I kept going to physiotherapy a lot, trying to build my knee and my leg back up. So I thought I was going to be a doctor or a physiotherapist for the longest time as well. After, of course, I wanted to be a rock star. So I went from rock star to kind of doctor / physiotherapist. In fact, I was admitted into a whole bunch of university programs to become that, into pre-med. And when I got to McGill in Montreal, Canada, I looked at one of the counselors there at McGill University and said, I don't think I want to be a doctor or a physiotherapist. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, I don't think so. And I said, what else do you have? Here I am. I'm pretty young. And the counselor's like, what do you mean, what do we have? You don't want to be a doctor or a physiotherapist? I said, no, I don't. I don't think I want to be one. And so they said, well, you could be an engineer. I said, no, no, my dad's an engineer. I don't want to be an engineer.
Ah,
Um, I'm like literally picking my life, I think, in a matter of minutes.
wow.
And I said, well, teacher, I'll be a teacher. How about that? And the woman looked at me hard and she said, you can't be a teacher. You're too
Oh.
smart. And
What?
I will show you. So I switched, into becoming a teacher, which didn't last long.
Hmm.
But really, my whole life, I think I've been a teacher. So rock star to doctor to teacher.
Hmm. I'm sorry for the surgery that happened when you were that 17 years old, and then life sometimes brought to us some unexpected things, but it get us something else in return. And I think from that point, and your career, your thinking also changing, and then helping you to have the strength to build a bridge of helping other people. Um, so thanks for taking the courageous decision to carry on, why a lot of people will blame in life for what happened to them, right? So you don't do that. That demonstrates a lot of man and leadership from the person that you are, Dan. So thanks for demonstrating that. And so how's as a teacher is also a way of educating others, building the bridge from the university to life. That's also a way that that leading to what you are doing today. So we're intrigued to know more after that. What after you graduate, what did you do, and how did you fall into this career though?
Well, luckily, I fell in love with a student at school with me, and she was in the education program as well.
Mm.
And we got married, and
Denise.
and we're still married. Yes,
Yeah,
Denise,
say
we
hello to Denise first, all right?
salute. So that was a long, long time ago,
Mm.
right in 1995, and we moved from Montreal all the way to Vancouver. A
Mm.
short 4,000 kilometer ride away, and Denise and I taught at the same high school, which was interesting.
Mm.
Where you're newlyweds and we're teaching high school together, so it was a
Mm.
bit weird at times, but we figured it out. But that said, it only took me a very short 2 years to realize that although Denise's purpose for certain on this earth is to help teenagers become adults,
Mm.
my purpose lied elsewhere. And
Mm.
as much as I loved the kids who we were getting to work with, I was, I guess, unfulfilled as
Mm.
a teacher in Vancouver.
Mm.
And, sat down with Denise one night, kind of halfway through our second year, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to quit.
Mm.
She's like, great, whatever, let's figure it out. We got to make sure that you find yourself. And so we moved to Ottawa,
Mm. Oh,
all
we'll
the way
back. Uh,
all the way back east in Canada, so another
uh,
4,000 kilometers east. And Denise got another job as a high school teacher in Ottawa,
uh,
which is the capital of Canada, for those that don't know. And I took one of those 1 year, all you can eat technology diplomas, thinking I wanted to get into high tech. So
mm.
this is 1997 now. So we've
Mm.
been married 2 years, in Vancouver for 2 years, and now we've moved back east for a year. And then we looked at each other and said, oh gosh, we don't want to be in the east anymore. This is cold. What are we doing? And
We're
so
back.
we went back. We went back a year later, all the way to Vancouver. Denise had another job
uh,
as an educator, and I decided that I really liked education, but maybe adults.
mm.
And so I pitched the dean of the British Columbia Institute of Technology
Mm.
this crazy idea, and
Mm.
the idea was, hey, why don't we start a career-changing department for adults
Mm.
who should be in possession of a degree or diploma, but they want to get into high tech. So now we're in 1998, of course,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And .com is going crazy. Amazon had just launched. There wasn't even Google yet
Mm.
at that point, but that's where we were. And I thought, yes, the combination of high tech, career changing, leadership, business skills. That's where I'm at, and I think I'm 26 years old.
Mm.
I'm pitching the dean this idea.
Mm.
I still think about this to this day. Like, what the heck? How did that happen? And and frankly, the dean was like, "Yeah, this is a good idea. Here you go."
Ah.
So so for about 5 years, I basically grew up. I grew
Mm.
up learning how to run a business because it was cost recovery.
Mm.
You had to sell potential students, on the merits of what you're trying to do, which is to
Mm.
help them career change.
Mm.
And we ended up running like a $4.5 million business
Wow.
inside the Institute of Technology to help mature adults
Mm.
switch into high tech or strategy or business management or what have you. It was so much fun, and I learned a lot. And I got to combine my passions, which were leadership, education, adults,
Uh,
and obviously high tech.
well, look back at the 26 years old, get into a school and talk to a dean who is expert in the field. What they do in the school is designed to teach others. And then normally back then, I don't think the education back then, the people was quite open to new idea, changing idea, and changing is scary, especially in the education sector. So how did you at the 26 years old get that confidence to come into the dean office, knock onto the door and say, hey, let's build this program all together? What courage did they give you?
If there's one thing that I don't suffer from, it's a lack of courage.
Mm.
I'm not cocky, but there's a difference between cocky and confident.
Mm.
So I have no problems whatsoever with my level of courage or confidence to go into any meeting and say,
Mm.
"Hey, what do you think? Here's an idea. What do you got? Let's listen. Let's work together." I have
Mm.
no qualms whatsoever.
Mm.
So it didn't even faze me. I just thought, yeah, this is the right place in which to pitch the idea, so let's go and pitch it.
Mm.
Um, and that's kind of like part of my DNA, I suppose, is
Ah.
that I have the why not attitude. Why
Ah.
not? Let's
Mm.
give it a go. Why not move to Ottawa? Why not
Mm.
move back to Vancouver? Why not, pitch the dean this idea? Why
Mm.
not?
That interested to me because uh, there's a lot of people want to have that mentality of asking the question why not, right? But then for some reason, for some, there's a lot of things that's stopping them from from ignite that desire from the inside. So allow me to bring you back to the past again. All right. So when you were a
Yeah,
little, did your parents who came from who got a British, right? They are British. Did they
yeah.
give you a lot of courage, support that enabling you to and to exploring the world the way that you are, or so that it helped you to be the why not mentality?
I
You
think
think?
there was, yeah, what a really good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before, And I'll say this, there was direct
Mm.
and subliminal, I would say, coaching or parenting.
Mm.
So I'll start with the subliminal. So the subliminal was, here are my parents whom have, emigrated to Canada with nothing.
Mm.
And my dad refused to work for anyone and started his own business in
Mm.
electrical engineering.
Yeah.
And so through my entire youth, till this day, he's 76 years old and still running his businesses.
Now?
Um, oh yeah, yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, he
Ah.
refuses to retire because he says, "What would I do? I'll just get bored."
Mm.
It's just lovely. So I've always watched him subliminally just try things, and hey, why not? Sure, give it a go. So that was sort of the subliminal part, and then the direct part was, of course, he would haul me out to places with him,
Mm.
with business deals
Mm.
or trade shows
Mm.
or customer calls
Mm.
or like lunches and meetings or going into some of the offices that he ran. And
Mm.
so directly like exposing me to some of those dealings allowed me a real life MBA as a kid.
Mm. How
Yeah.
amazing he is, huh? Bringing you to the journey together and then teaching you how to build the entrepreneur mindset from when you were very young. That that helping you owning your life and own the decisions that you're making forward. I think it's a beautiful things that as fathers we should be doing more often as parents. I think not just a father, but mom can also do the same thing. So, right, yeah. So, how's the journey after the university and the program that you've been built up and successfully deployed? What happened after that?
Well, I guess I got into my early 30s, like
Mm.
30, 31 or so, 32 years old, and I said to myself, well, when I'm 50, which I am now,
Mm.
I better have some real world experience
Mm.
if I want to be a really good academic. My
Mm.
whole thinking was that, when I'm 50 and 60, I'll probably want to go back
Mm.
into university or higher ed, but I better know what the real world is like. And
Mm.
I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go listen to some of the people who were phoning me
Mm.
about maybe coming over to the corporate world, particularly in high tech, because during the 5 years at the institute, I was making tons of relationships in Vancouver, in San Francisco, in Seattle,
Mm.
in Toronto, and so my network was beginning to build. As
Mm.
I've always said, my network is my net worth,
Yeah.
and I used that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, where can I go now? And I ended up in the end of 2002 moving on to a high-tech company that was called Crystal Decisions.
Crystal decision.
Yeah, so it's a business intelligence company. It
Mm.
had, I think, about 2,000 employees, 1,500, and they didn't really have any kind of corporate university, anything. And
Mm.
so they kind of said, hey, could you come in and maybe help us with this idea, which is training our employees? I was
Ah.
like, yes, I can do that,
Uh-huh.
because basically I've been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So within a couple weeks, to be honest, the next thing I'm doing is I'm also running external education services for
Mm.
customers and partners and suppliers and so on. So I've got both internal and external, learning happening at Crystal Decisions, which then became Business Objects because a French company bought Crystal Decisions,
Mm.
which then became SAP because
Mm.
SAP bought Business Objects. So for 6 or 7 years, I'm in an absolute spotlight
Mm.
of high-tech growth, change, M&A, global growth, like offices everywhere, 10,000 employees pushing to be a billion-dollar company, and then SAP bought that company, and so now I'm dealing with a giant
Mm.
whom is trying to tuck in, these employees and so on. So for these 6 or 7 years, I'm just baptism by fire learning,
Mm.
having the best old time, learning what culture is all about for certain, helping to build it across the company, becoming, the chief learning officer in essence of internal and external,
Mm.
and just, honestly, how I am privileged to have had that opportunity.
Mm.
But then I had to make another choice, right?
Mm.
Do
What
I want to,
happened?
well, do I want to stay at SAP, whom weren't exactly at the time listening to me about how important culture and purpose and leadership really
Mm.
is? And, I made a very painful decision, which was to leave and leave my team of 100 plus people
Wow.
without anywhere to go. So I just said, I've had enough. And,
uh,
I made sure that everyone had a job on the
uh,
team.
uh.
Uh, it was painful, I'll tell you that,
I'm
Bob. But
sorry.
I, I literally asked Denise if I could go to Italy for a couple weeks and ride my bike so I could
Mm.
clear my head, and I did.
Mm.
And by that point, I started listening to potential organizations to work with. I thought about going back to university because I had a
Mm.
couple offers there. I listened to Google and Royal Bank of Canada and Adobe, and I'm thinking to myself, well, these are all great. But then I eventually said, well, I need another vertical. I need to be in another company or another kind of industry
Mm.
than high tech, because
Mm.
Adobe and Google were kind of fun opportunities to consider.
Mm.
So I went into telecom, because in my backyard was TELUS, which is a huge telecommunications
Mm.
company. They wanted someone to come in and help them with culture change.
Mm.
And it was now 2008,
Mm.
and it was like, okay, this is like, sign me up. Let's go for another journey.
Uh.
And I was CLO for 5 or 6 years in that role, helping the organization shift,
Mm.
its employee engagement from 51% to 87% in a
Mm.
5-year period. And just we did a whole bunch of great things and great people. So
Mm.
that was another chapter in the
Mm.
book of Dan.
Wow. I think that you has been exploring to a culture development changing and building that culture is very early age of the HR era, human resource era, where organization back then starting to realize the importance of building something up besides paying the employees, and so build the home from the roof foundation up, right? So it's a good learning opportunities. And then you've been in different industry, different setup, different stage of the business also. And then you took a leap of faith again. And this is the leap of faith that I'm interested in most. Then having
Yeah.
your own organization, and then and we see a significant change in here, and where, and tell us how did that whole thing started.
Well, one of the things I consciously decided to do, when I moved from SAP to TELUS in
Yeah.
2008, in December 2008, was to become far more public than I've ever been to prior to that point.
Mm.
What I mean by public, I mean, okay, I'm going to start finally my own blog,
Mm.
danpontefract.com.
Mm.
I'm going to push for free speaking engagements. And if I
Mm.
can talk about culture change and
Mm.
leadership and so on, maybe that'll be a good thing.
Mm.
I push to write articles
Mm.
in T&D magazine or CLO magazine or SHRM or wherever. And I would just continue to say, hey, I've got this topic, this idea, this plot twist. Can I send you 800 to 1,000 words? Maybe you'll publish it. Um, and and so with that kind of recognition to myself that I needed to become more public, it was thinking about myself as a 36-year-old,
Mm.
what I wanted again to be 10 years later.
Mm.
And what I wanted to be when I was 10 years later was to be able to indeed go out on my own.
Mm.
But if I wanted to go out on my own, I needed to be known for something or many things or something in between.
Mm.
And so that conscious idea of getting out there and being public back in 2008, I think was a wise choice.
Mm.
I did lots of things wrong. I mean, I called my blog Training Wreck to begin with. It was a bit of a train wreck, right? It was like I had no idea what I was doing. I got onto Twitter in 2008 because it was like, oh, this sounds like the right thing to do, and so on, right? So fast forward to 2012, and there's an editor in the audience of one of the keynotes that I'm giving, and the editor comes up to me from Wiley and says, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I said, "Yes, I have." And I sent him over 2 or 3 chapters of this book that I was writing.
Which one was that?
Well, that became my first book. My first book, called Flat Army. And however, I said doing lots of things wrong. These 3 chapters, the title for the book was called The Coffee Shop Leader, and it was a fable. So I had 4 main characters. They come into the coffee shop every Tuesday and Saturday, and they talk leadership, culture. And so all these stories were swirling, and they'd have these, guest appearances from people who come into the coffee shop. Anyway, so Don, the editor from Wiley, reads the first 3 chapters, and he phones me up about a month later, and he says, "Dan, interesting 3 chapters. You do know we're at Wiley and we have Pat Lencioni, right?" I said, Yeah, he's like, we don't need any more fable writers. Can you write in first person what Dan thinks about corporate culture?
Ah,
And I said, of course I can. And so that became Flat Army, the first book. How to create a connected and engaged organization.
wow.
And I really like, again, I like the book. I don't love it because I wasn't really sure like how to write a book.
Ah,
I'm a much better writer now, 10 years later. But there's one of those examples where it's just like, because I was keynote speaking, just so happened that there was someone in the audience, and one gentleman started my author career because I made a decision 4 years prior to that to be public and to do things like keynote speaking.
mm. I think this is not coming out of the blue. It was intention. That was intention made by you back in 2008 to make yourself public and pushing the boundaries of getting to free talks and then getting paid for keynote speaking later. But then everything is free at the beginning to push the boundary, to push you to writing also, right? And that's the book that you write, Open to Think, and I really interest to know that for several reasons. Okay, first, I think thinking is hard. Yeah, it's not easy, and then that's why there's an old saying: you think it's hard, so we put people judge, right? And then but we can take the part people judge out because that's in negative, so don't care about that. But I do think that thinking is not easy. That's why a lot of us don't have a clear idea of how to think and how to think it right. A second thing is my wife and I is on the path of a passion to help people to grow the ability to think again, because we do see that that growth of thinking actually on the decline in mode at the moment around the
Yeah.
people. Yeah. So how did you come up with the idea of writing about thinking?
Well, to be fair and honest, when Flat Army published, and then
Mm,
soon after, I started writing the second book called The Purpose Effect, so that
mm,
we can have like a yin yang, like culture needs purpose, purpose needs
mm,
culture. I got
mm.
frustrated, and I
Why?
got frustrated at the level of freneticism and lack of creative thinking, and the lack of
Mm,
pause and pondering, and the lack of good judicious decision making about culture and purpose,
mm,
about kind of our organizations. And I thought to myself, why is this happening? And then it was like, oh, I know why it's not. Because people are not open to think. And that's where that
mm,
all of a sudden that line came to me. Like, open to think. So the book is twofold. You can literally open the book to think,
mm.
or you can be open to think.
Ah,
And so it's still a play on words. So it was definitely conscious. And it was also, I kept seeing some things happening in society
ah,
where that freneticism or the lack of pause was happening in meetings. I would observe leaders or team members, whether they're fidgeting on their phone or not paying attention, people late to meetings, people
mm,
not remembering the meeting, people not taking notes in meetings. I mean, meetings are not evil, but
mm,
um, they do allow you to unearth where a lot of people's character
mm,
are
mm,
or are not.
mm,
And then, for me, it was like, do I have to go back to like grade 5 and help people see when your grade 5 teacher was teaching you creative thinking and critical thinking, how important it is, huh? And I said, I guess I do. Because we've become so addicted to busyness
mm,
and addicted to dopamine,
mm.
i.e., you know, the red check marks on your Instagram post or whatever, right? It's
Yes.
and it still continues. I don't think the pandemic's helped. It
Mm,
might have even exacerbated our lack of thinking.
mm.
So that's why it was a bit out of frustration.
Your example is very very art, because we heard about frustrations that makes us make decisions to do something better, and but this is the first time that I saw I really, really have examined and a story from a speaker said actually yes I wrote the book because of out of frustration.
Hey,
Yeah.
I was honest as it comes. I mean, it's literally why I
Mm,
got frustrated and exasperated at
mm,
what was going on. I'm not perfect,
mm,
but I at least observed enough of what some really good teams and leaders and organizations were doing to
mm,
suggest a composite playbook of sorts
mm,
that allows people to see we still have to do things. Like things have to get done, huh? I'm not
mm,
naive, but what are we doing to get better at the doing
mm.
if we could spend some more time on the creative and the critical thinking?
And that lead me to one question I think is interesting for people to hear the answers from your end. In here, I note that you ask yourself a lot of big questions. Okay, when you were 30, you asked, what would you become 20 years later, which is now. All right, and then you ask yourself, what will be your 10 years later you're gonna become. So the future is always uncertain, and but you ask from, you ask now for the future of yourself require you to do a lot of thinking, a lot of making judgment. Back then, how did you envision yourself, and asking when you ask yourself that question, how did you feel about asking that question to start off with?
I think one of the quote there's two quotes I suppose that I mean there's many quotes in my head, but two that run around in my head a lot. One is from Soren Kierkegaard,
Mm,
famous Danish philosopher, and within this really difficult passage and very negative passage,
mm,
there's this wonderful little line, and Kierkegaard writes, to be that self which one truly is.
mm,
I roll that off my tongue a lot. To be that self which one truly is. To be that self which one truly is. And it's a self affirmation that it's okay to be you,
mm,
but it's also a hint of future thinking.
mm,
To be, to be is future, right?
yes.
To be that self which one truly is. Now you're
Mm,
back to present tense, and you're
mm,
having this battle between be and is.
mm,
And I think that's life's journey. Is that I am never happy with quote the status quo because I'll challenge
mm,
myself on what
mm,
I might be
mm,
now and in the future. So it's not that I'm unhappy. I'm very happy.
mm,
I find myself quite eudaimonic. I mean, I take pleasure in the little things and the big things. When I do get unhappy, it's when I feel as though I haven't done enough thinking and battling with myself on what could be.
mm,
What could be? Why not? Back to
mm,
that point earlier.
mm.
Um, and then, of course, Maya Angelou's, it's not what you say that people remember, but it's how you make them feel.
Mm,
Right? And so it's beautiful. I mean, I badgered it a little bit. It's not the exact phrase. I paraphrase, but it's that. I have often pushed myself to worry about how people feel
mm,
when I've left the room or when they've left the room. And
mm,
so, like thinking about that and acting in a way I hope that is meaningful, purpose-driven, authentic,
mm,
ethical. Like you see me, you get what you get. My
mm.
kids get this, Denise gets this, you get this. Like I don't change. There's no facade. Like it's just me. I don't know any different. So with that, the the sort of existential, who are you and what do you want to become? How do you want to let people feel you and be felt by you?
Mm,
Is that constant muscle development?
mm. I see.
And yeah, and I refuse. So let me paint it differently.
Mm,
Um, Houses, homes, places where you live.
mm,
I am always and have always thought about, well, how do we as a family grow and then give it away? So, when it was just Denise and I, we bought a condo. And then when we were pregnant with our first child, we bought a 3-level townhome. And when we were pregnant with our second child, we said we should buy a duplex. And then we were pregnant with our third child, we were like, maybe we should probably buy a home. And when we were kind of in the really early development phase of kind of a 4, 6, 8-year-old, we looked at each other and said, well, maybe we should move from Vancouver to Victoria to have a little bit more community. And after, 5 years of living in that community, we said, well, in a house, we said, well, maybe we should actually build our own house because we're entering the teenager years. So that we can have specific, style to how we want to live kind of a 7-year period with the teenagers. We're living in that house right now. And we're now, like, once they're young adults, it's like, okay, we don't need this house. So now what are we going to do to have a different type of home where we can welcome in, I hope, their families occasionally into some other different style of home. So, thinking like that, and again, my kids are 19, 17, and 15 now. That's how I think. It's always about, well, what can you be? Where are you now? And how can you make people feel now and in the future?
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I think the feeling part is extremely important. That to carry our legacy forever. I think the feeling is the only thing that can impact the people to make the change. I had a conversation the other day with one of the amazing leader, and he said that the old saying is that if the impact of a leader is how employees talk about that leader together, but the true impact of the leader is how the employee carry on that conversation home in their dining tables and talk to their children about how great or how bad a leader is to be. And then that can build or kill the future of the kids also. So if so it forces us to be a lot more mindful on what we are doing every day, so that the story that happen at their dining tables every day can build hope for the future generation. So thank you for sharing sharing how you feel on doing the things in advance, 10 years time, 20 years time, and how to build in the bridge to get there, like not like the last name that you have, but in the way that in the reverse way, building bridge now to the next, now to the next, and next to the next, and things like that. And uh, and then I really appreciate that. I would like to come to the part where you write the book, Lead Can Win. Okay. Yes. What happened to that then?
What happened, like how I got to writing
Yeah.
that, or
What
yeah?
we want to hear the stories out of that.
Well, um, so as an individual who had made a decision to leave the corporate world, but to help the corporate world and public sector and not-for-profit organizations with, I hope, a better way of operating, i.e., culture and so forth. I said to myself, okay, I have just published Open to Think, which was in the fall of 2018. I'm leaving TELUS at the end of 2018 to go out on my own January 1st, 2019, with the Pontefract group, which is irony because it's just me. There's no group, it's just me. But I like the joke to myself. So the Pontefract group was gone live January 1st, 2019, and on January 2nd, 2019, I began writing my quote leadership book. And I didn't want a quote leadership book, but I wanted a playbook, a guide. And so through the years of 1995 through to 2019, I had myself a good 24 years of observation of my own leadership, of developing leaders, of running workshops and conferences and events and interviewing like thousands of people in focus groups or one-on-ones or whatever, knowing what I hope to be the composite index, right, of what I think would be a leader for the 21st century. And so so it was sort of how many of these, attributes ought I to have, and I whittled it down and got to 9. And so lead, care, win, how to become, there's the word again, like to be, how to become a leader who matters, was based on 24 years of recognizing what works and what doesn't in organizational, business unit, team, and self-leadership. So the joke is, of course, if you think about the book, lead, care, win, if you put an S in the front of the word care, it's lead, scare, win. And that's kind of what's working for many leaders. they just scare people and they win. And so there's a second book I might write, which will be tongue-in-cheek, called Lead, Scare, Win. But lead, care, win, it's not, it sounds like, we just have to give people hugs and everything will be fine. No, caring comes in all kinds of different forms. Caring can be, how do you learn and develop your team and yourself? Caring can be, yes, things like empathy and relatability. But caring is also measures like clarity. So how clear are you with your team about deadlines? How clear are you on responsiveness, on getting back to texts and DMs and emails and so on, right? So there's just these 9 that I eventually landed on, I think serve well as lessons. And so that's the other thing not many people pick up on, but that's okay. And that is, there aren't chapters in Lead, Care, Win.
There are what?
It's not chapter 4 or chapter 8. They're lessons. So it's lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 9. And that's what they are. They're lessons. Like it's a playbook, literally a guide for you to lead self and hopefully lead others.
Wow. I would definitely look up onto that one. Then there's one word that you repeated at least 6 times up until now is the word observation and the ability to observe, right? And then God give us all having 2 eyes and to see, to watch, but the level of depth in terms of observation uh, differ from person to person. So somebody may be working for 40 years in an organization, but the ability to observe is close to zero, or 10%. But somebody may be working like you are, working 24 years in the corporate, in different sectors and things like that. But the ability to observe in a very, very deep level that leading to a lot of great experience and great things that you can deliver into the life of your home first, and then to the community that you serve, and to the people around that community. So can you give us a lesson number 10, okay? On how Dan was able to observe and use the observation capability and strengthen it every day. Can you give us that 10th lesson?
You know what? Hi, it's a great question, and I think I'll break it down to something that's rather simple, because that's how my brain works. I have a simple brain, and I like to just think simple terms. So to observe, I argue, is tantamount to being able to listen first. So if you just listen, there's a trick here. Because the word listen, when you jumble all the letters up, and it's an anagram, it actually can also spell the word silent. So to me, and for me, to observe is to listen to people. But you also have to be silent, because they have so much to give as you observe, whether it's their behavior, what they're saying, what they're not saying, how they're acting, how they're behaving, how they're misbehaving. You just have to really listen for and be silent to the undercurrents, the undertow, the things that aren't seen is what's in the ocean, the undercurrent, the undertow.
Mm.
So if you can find a way in which to be silent and to listen to that undertow, that undercurrent,
Mm.
that is observation 101 for me.
So listen and silent, right? And then watching for the thing that's said, and also watching for the things that untold. So that we can increase our ability to observing things around us, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the importance of today's leader, and that's
Mm.
leader of self or leader of others.
Mm.
But that is, you have to pay attention.
Mm.
And, I'm not talking about the headlines.
Mm.
It's not enough to pay attention to the headlines. You have to pay attention and observe the trend lines.
Mm.
And the trend lines are where the gold and the data and the I guess the results from the observation of being silent and listening take place.
Mm.
And that's the undertow, the undercurrent I'm talking about. It's that you can't just read, New York Times and CNN and Fox and whatever your news outlet is and just look at the headline.
Mm.
That is not enough. You have to dig deeper. And to dig deeper means you got to be silent and listen to words and to people and to habits and to trend lines. I don't know another way in which for us to be better human beings than to do that. And ergo, my point about and how you cheekily brought up open to think, right? We need the time and the space and the matter of open thinking. Because if we're not, then we're not observing. And we're not observing, we're not listening, and we're not being silent to data, to people, to trends, to connecting of the dots. And so what do? We end up making poor decisions. We stress people out. We become sycophants or bullies. It's not fun.
Then you talk about connecting the dots, and that actually exactly what I'm about to ask you. So you said earlier than than the plan, and but thanks for bringing that up because I love to hear how's all the dots being connected. Years ago, when you and Denise met, and had the love in teaching for children and things like that. You move around country from the east to the west, west to the east, and back to the west, and then you ask yourself a question of moving forward for 10 years or 20 years and things like that, and now 20 years later already, and then you can start to see how the dots been connected already, and how do you feel about all that connecting between unbroken things, the broken things before, now is all put into a puzzle all together. How does it feel?
What a great question. On a professional level, for me, I've really enjoyed the journey. I have not stayed put. I've continued to push myself. I've learned through each of these hops. I will have several more hops in the future to consider. On a personal level, I'd like to say to Denise that life is for living. And she says the same thing right back at me, right? And so we live life. Like we don't sit still. We push ourselves from job to job or career to career, from city to city. We push ourselves for holidays, making sure we take them, but making sure we do things that are different. So on a personal level, like again, I'm pretty flourishing. And then when I look out and I look at society, I'm torn, to be frank, and I'm torn because I see such goodness. I mean, I reach out, I listen to those trend lines, and I see, founders like Mohammed Leela, who put together Goodable. And Goodable is this good news app and site, and Mohammed and the team are doing just incredible things to help resurrect goodness and people who are thriving and organizations doing good. So for every Muhammad Leela, however, there are 3 to 4 negative things that are happening, and or people who refuse to push through, what is a great culture, what is purpose, what is good open thinking, what is care in our leadership, how do I bloom, as a human being. And so I want more Muhammad Leelas. I want there to be like an overabundance of Muhammad Leelas than I currently see. Hence me being slightly torn for where we are as a society.
You are one, Dennis is one, and then start everything from our home first and build a great home. The great home will impact great communities, and great communities will better society. So a small little bridge that you build will create a better Iceland, all right? And then islands will be beautiful islands attract more beautiful people to coming in and welcoming them, right? So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. I've been bringing you from time to time in your life, and then again I want to bring you to the future. Okay. so if is there anything exciting that you are doing and then you want to share to me and the audience of the program, can you share? Would you?
Yeah, I'm kind of like friends of mine, Roger Martin, Henry Mintzberg. We're kind of individuals who kid around and say, "So what's the next book you're writing?" Because we all have this insufferable DNA that I think we're all masochists. That you kind of have this idea and you push it and you keep writing. And so I am writing another book, and the tentative title, which I think will become the title, is called Blooming.
Blooming.
And Blooming, yeah. Subtitle to be determined. But what I've realized, in part because of the pandemic, but mostly because of the last 25 or so years, is that because I always look panoptically like at the world, there's kind of a missing intersection that we need to do a better job on, and that's the intersection of work and life. And no, I'm not talking about work-life balance.
No more.
But what I'm getting at is, if you think about it, as the organization goes with its culture, its purpose, its strategy, its organizational processes, like HR, like finance, like IT, if it sucks, very hard to get motivated to be in the organization as a human being. But conversely, I mean, you and I are both human beings, and we're not solely defined by our work. So there's an intersection point where the organization and we have to recognize that we're human beings. And so what have we done as human beings to sort out our identity? Our sense of worth, our sense of meaning. Who are we? And are we apt to course correct and to learn and to tweak and to make modifications as is necessary? And so if you were to think of an x-axis and a y-axis, the x-axis is me and you, human beings. And the y-axis is the place where we work. And what we need is really high, engaged, truthful, trusting, purpose-driven organizations. Because the opposite puts you at the bottom of the y-axis. And the same is true of ourselves. We need to be full of hope and understanding and truth and purpose and meaning and worth and so on. Because the opposite, when that's happening, well, imagine if you're someone who doesn't know who they are, who's disengaged at work, and the two come together. That is not good.
Yes.
The opposite, of course, is when you have figured out who you are and the organization is a great place to work, well, that's where the artists are. That's where you're flourishing. That's where you're thriving.
Yeah.
That's where you're blooming. It's my point.
Wow. Thank you
And
for
so,
sharing. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm working on is finding the right intersection and the right
Hmm.
points, and to help people through that maze.
Wow. I think to me, an organization is a combination, is a living body in a combination of many, many real living bodies, which is you and me, working for the organization. So if we as an individual can find that blossom moment and evolve with organization into that blossom, then that works becoming so meaningful, and the dining table that we talk, it will be so exciting, so many hopes out there, so many bright things that the generation at home can think about the future and heading toward a workforce ready. And but it all starts from the realization, the works that the people like you to do to build that bridge up for people and for organizations. So thank you for doing that, Dan. And I love the last part that you put on your LinkedIn profile, having a beer when you come into Ireland. Okay. Yep, I'm a big fan of having a beer and expand the network. So the next time, if you travel to my country, please let us know first. So I would love to take your 15, 17, 19 years old children, Denise, you, and the friends maybe you brought along to the journey together for having some beers, all right?
The minute I'm in Ho Chi Minh, you are my first call. You are a wonderful, wonderful thinker, a great gentleman, a human being of extraordinary proportions. You keep doing what you're doing, please, because the world needs more Haas, that's for sure.
Thank you very much for the kind words. You have a wonderful evening there. Please say hello to your family on behalf of us in here, okay?
And me to yours, my friend.
Thank you, my brother. Bye bye.
Bye.